The Crimson Moon Pack had gathered under a full moon, the kind of night that was supposed to bring good fortune. Lena Voss stood at the edge of the crowd, her hands folded tightly in front of her, trying to make herself as small as possible. She had never liked standing in the open where everyone could see her. For years, the pack had whispered about her weak scent, about how her wolf never seemed to howl as loudly as the others, about how she was different in a way nobody bothered to understand. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight, she had hoped, might finally change things. Damon Rourke stood across the clearing, tall and confident, already surrounded by pack members who admired him. He was set to become Beta soon, second only to the Alpha himself, and everyone knew it. Lena had known for 3 years that Damon was her fated mate. She had felt it the moment their eyes first met, a pull so strong it had nearly brought her to her knees. She had never told anyone, waiting for the right moment, hoping he felt it too and would come to her in his own time. That moment came, but not in the way she had dreamed. The Alpha called for silence, and the gathering hushed. It was tradition for mates to be announced publicly during the full moon ceremony, a way of honoring the bond the moon goddess had chosen. Lena's heart pounded as Damon stepped forward. Perhaps this was it. Perhaps he would finally say her name. Instead, Damon turned toward her with an expression of embarrassment, not affection. His eyes, once warm, when they occasionally met hers in passing, were now filled with something close to disdain. "I know you are my true mate," he said, his voice ringing clearly through the clearing so that no one could pretend they hadn't heard. "But I reject you, Lena Voss. You are weak, and I will not tie my future to someone who cannot stand beside me as an equal." The words hit her like a physical blow. Gasps rippled through the crowd, but no one moved to comfort her. Lena felt the air leave her lungs as if she had been struck. The rejection of a fated mate before an entire pack was one of the deepest wounds a wolf could suffer, a public declaration that she was not enough, not wanted, not worthy. Damon continued, unaware or uncaring of the damage his words had caused. I intend to court the Alpha's daughter instead. She is strong, and our joining will benefit the pack." He said this as though he were discussing a business arrangement, rather than destroying someone's heart in front of hundreds of witnesses. Lena wanted to run, but her legs felt frozen. She could feel every eye in the clearing on her, some pitying, some indifferent, a few even amused. She had spent her whole life trying to prove she belonged, and in a single moment, Damon had erased any chance of that. The Alpha, Damon's father, did not intervene. If anything, he looked relieved that his son had chosen someone more suitable. When the ceremony ended and the crowd dispersed, whispering among themselves, Lena finally found the strength to move, walking swiftly toward the trees before anyone could see the tears finally falling. The following days were unbearable. Word of the rejection spread through the pack quickly, and Lena became a target of pity and cruelty in equal measure. Some avoided her as though her misfortune might be contagious. Others made comments just loud enough for her to hear, calling her broken, unworthy, cursed. The Alpha summoned her within the week and, with little warmth in his voice, informed her that it would be best for everyone if she left Crimson Moon territory. A rejected mate living among the pack created tension, he said, especially with Damon's new courtship underway. Lena did not argue. She had nothing left to fight for there. She packed the few belongings she owned into a worn bag and left before sunrise, when the pack still slept and no one would witness her departure. She walked for 2 days without a clear destination, surviving on berries and the occasional kindness of strangers she passed on forest trails. She had heard of a neutral trading town that lay near the border of the Alpha King's territory, a place where wolves without a pack sometimes found temporary shelter or work. It was not a plan so much as a direction, but it was the only one she had. On the second night, exhaustion overtook her. She had not eaten properly in days, and her wolf, already weakened by the emotional toll of rejection, could not summon the strength to help her travel faster. When a group of rogue wolves caught her scent, sensing an unprotected female traveling alone, she barely managed to escape into a ravine, scraping her arms and legs badly in the process. She kept moving out of pure instinct, her body running on fear alone. By the time she reached the edge of a wide, iron-gated structure that stretched high into the night sky, she had nothing left. The gate loomed before her, flanked by stone walls and torches that burned steadily despite the wind. She did not know it was the royal gate, the entrance to the sovereign lands ruled by the Alpha King himself. She only knew that her legs finally gave out beneath her, and she collapsed onto the cold ground just outside its boundary. King Alistair Thorne was returning from a routine patrol along the border when his wolf suddenly went still. Something in the air had shifted, a scent unlike anything he had encountered before, faint but unmistakably calling to something deep within him. He had ruled for nearly a decade, feared across every territory for his strength and his solitude. Many believed he would never find a mate, that his position had made him too guarded, too consumed by duty to feel such a bond. He had accepted that belief himself, until this moment. He followed the scent without hesitation, his guards trailing close behind, confused by their king's sudden urgency. When he reached the gate, he found her there, a young woman collapsed on the ground, her clothes torn, her skin pale from exhaustion and cold. Despite her condition, the pull he felt was undeniable. This was his mate. The moon goddess had chosen her for him. Alistair knelt beside her immediately, his guards watching in stunned silence as their composed and formidable king displayed a tenderness none of them had ever witnessed. He gently checked for injuries, relief washing over him when he found nothing life-threatening, only the marks of a difficult journey and clear signs of neglect. Word of the king's sudden stop at the gate spread quickly among those present, including several visiting delegates from neighboring packs who had arrived that evening for scheduled negotiations. A crowd began to form at a respectful distance, murmuring questions about what had caused their king to kneel in the dirt before an unknown woman. When Lena stirred, her eyes fluttering open, she found herself looking up into a face she did not recognize, though something in her chest recognized him instantly. The pull was different from what she had felt with Damon, deeper somehow, steadier, as though the bond understood exactly what she needed. "Can you hear me?" Alistair asked softly, his voice gentle, despite the authority naturally woven into it. Lena nodded weakly, too tired and too confused to speak. Alistair turned to address the gathered witnesses, his voice now carrying the full weight of his position. "This woman is my mate," he announced, his tone leaving no room for question or doubt. "I claim her here, before the royal gate and all who stand witness, as is my right and hers." The declaration carried enormous weight. Claimings made at the royal gate were considered among the most binding in all the territories, recognized instantly by every pack under the king's rule. There would be no rejection, no dispute, no room for anyone to challenge the bond once it had been spoken at this place. Lena, still weak from her journey, could hardly process what was happening. She had arrived at the gate with nothing, expecting perhaps temporary shelter or passage into the trading town. Instead, she found herself being carried gently into the king's own care, his guards immediately alert to her comfort and safety in a way she had never experienced in her entire life at Crimson Moon. Over the following weeks, as Lena recovered within the walls of the king's court, something remarkable began to happen. Freed from the constant judgment and belittlement she had endured for years, her wolf slowly began to stir, with a strength she had never known she possessed. The healers who examined her expressed quiet astonishment, noting that her scent, once dismissed as weak, actually carried traces of an old and powerful bloodline, one that had simply been suppressed by years of stress and mistreatment. News of the king's claiming traveled fast across every territory, eventually reaching Crimson Moon Pack. Damon, upon hearing that the woman he had publicly rejected was now the mate of the most powerful ruler in the land, felt a cold dread settle over him. The Alpha, his father, understood immediately the political danger their pack now faced. The Alpha King's court held authority over trade routes, border protections, and countless agreements that Crimson Moon depended upon. Insulting the king's mate, even unknowingly, and even before the claiming had occurred, was not something that could simply be forgotten. Alistair, for his part, did not rush to punish the pack that had cast Lena aside. He was a patient ruler, and he understood that true strength lay not in quick vengeance, but in careful judgment. Instead, he focused on helping Lena heal, spending time with her each day, listening as she slowly opened up about the life she had lived before arriving at his gate. He never made her feel pitied, only heard, and in that steady patience, Lena began to trust him in a way she had never trusted anyone. Weeks turned into a season, and Lena's transformation continued. She learned about the responsibilities that came with her new position, about the history of the territories, about the delicate balance the king maintained among the many packs under his protection. She proved to be a quick learner, thoughtful and fair in her judgments, qualities that quickly earned the respect of those within the court who had initially been skeptical of a mate who arrived at the gate as a stranger with no status. Eventually the day came when Crimson Moon Pack was summoned to the king's court, as tradition required for any pack seeking to maintain good standing with the sovereign territory. Damon and the Alpha arrived with visible unease, aware that their previous treatment of Lena had likely reached the king's ears in full detail. When they entered the grand hall, Lena sat beside Alistair, no longer the quiet, overlooked woman from the gathering months earlier. She carried herself with a calm confidence that surprised everyone who remembered her from before. The king allowed the silence to stretch for a long moment before speaking. "You stand before us today to discuss trade agreements," he said evenly. "But before we proceed, I believe there is a matter that deserves acknowledgement." Damon's face paled as the king's gaze settled on him. Rather than delivering harsh punishment, Alistair turned the matter over to Lena, trusting her judgment completely. All eyes shifted to her, waiting to see how the woman who had been so cruelly discarded would respond to those who had wronged her. Lena looked at Damon for a long moment, remembering the pain of that night, the humiliation that had once felt unbearable. But she also recognized how far she had come since then, and how that pain, as sharp as it had been, had ultimately led her to where she now belonged. "I do not seek cruelty," she said finally, her voice steady and clear. "I ask only that Crimson Moon Pack commit to treating its members with fairness, regardless of how strong or weak their scent may seem. No one should be made to feel as small as I once did." The Alpha, visibly relieved by her mercy, agreed immediately to her terms, promising reforms within the pack to ensure such treatment would not happen again. Damon, humbled and clearly regretful, said little, though the shame on his face spoke clearly enough. As the court emptied and the visitors departed, Alistair took Lena's hand gently. "You showed more grace than most would have," he said quietly. "I did not want to become someone who causes pain simply because pain was once caused to me," Lena replied. In the months that followed, preparations began for Lena's formal coronation as queen. The territories that had once known her only as a rejected Omega now prepared to honor her as their future ruler, a transformation few could have predicted on that painful night beneath the full moon. On the day of the coronation, the halls of the king's court were filled with representatives from every pack, including a subdued delegation from Crimson Moon. Lena stood beside Alistair as the crown was placed upon her head, her posture strong, her eyes clear and unwavering. She thought briefly of the woman she had been at the gate, collapsed and broken, believing she had nothing left to offer the world. That woman could never have imagined standing here now, chosen not despite her worth, but because of a strength that had simply needed the right place to grow. As the court erupted into celebration, Alistair looked at her with quiet admiration, grateful that fate had led her to his gate on that difficult night. Lena, standing tall beside him, finally understood that true belonging had never depended on being accepted by those who could not see her value. It depended on finding the place, and the person, who could.